Hey, Brennan Sullivan here, going to talk about my first ever ride that I did with my friend John. It was our first overnight, and it was something that I was not expecting to happen. It was definitely a beautiful ride, and the trail was the Northern Rail Trail in New Hampshire. It's a 57-mile ride each way on a mud / crushed gravel trail. So it's a natural trail, multi-use trail that gets used by cyclists, hikers, horses, and in the wintertime gets used by snowmobiles, and I guess the occasional ATV in the summertime. So I'm here to talk about how we did on the trail. When we first started riding, we had predominantly been riding a paved trail near our area, and we were both doing fairly well on the paved trail. Neither of us had really ridden before, so after we were consistently doing 40 to 50 miles in a day, we figured 47 or 57 miles wasn't really going to be much of a big deal. I mean, it was a rail trail, so relatively flat. Didn't expect much, but what we didn't take into account is how much more energy it takes to ride on a dirt trail than it does on a paved trail. And that was overconfidence on my part. So we set off around noon, 12:30, 1 o'clock on the trail. It was in August of 2016. So we figured it was going to take roughly about 4 to 5 hours to complete the trail. And unfortunately, things did not go as planned. Yeah, we did not have lights. We did not really have much of anything. We carried some snacks with us because we were only expecting a few hours of a ride. We also carried just a couple water bottles and camelbacks, which was definitely helpful. So as things went on, it started off really well. We were doing fairly good. Got 10 miles in. Mosquitoes. We got 10 miles in, and our morale was pretty good. Thinking to ourselves, we're a fifth of the way through or a sixth of the way through. Things weren't going to be much harder than what they were. So we had a snack, refreshed our legs, stretched a little bit, and then carried on our way. As we were going along, we'd occasionally run into another group of riders, and we'd exchange pleasantries, just ask about how the trail was ahead and where they were coming from. It was nice to get the chance to talk to some people that we hadn't met before. So as we went, we noticed that things were slowly getting harder. The crushed gravel became fewer and far between, and it was more mud and wet dirt, which I guess is mud, because it had rained a few days before. And I had noticed that as time went on, it just became harder and harder. And about 20 to 30 miles in, I had really started questioning whether or not I could finish the trail. But thankfully, my friend John talked me through it. Obviously, we didn't really have much of a choice. We were in the middle of nowhere, and we weren't really going to get to any kind of civilization until we reached the end. And, the day was slowly burning on. We were running out of daylight. Because at that time, I think was about 4 or 5 o'clock. The sun was starting to really set. So a sense of urgency kicked in because we didn't have lights to light our way. We were in a trail in the woods, and once the sun goes down, how are we going to see where we are? So we continued on as fast as we could. Our snacks were running low because we didn't plan on how long the ride was going to be. And we had burned through most of our food. But as we went along, the sights we saw were just amazing. Came across a covered bridge, which you don't see too many of those. So, I mean, it was nice, you know, coming across some of the other sites, seeing the occasional lake and river, you know, along the trail, which was definitely beautiful. And it gave you that little extra push to keep trying, you know, to keep going. So, eventually we persevered long enough to get to the end of the trail. Now, our hotel wasn't in Lebanon. We still had another 4 or 5 miles to go to get to our hotel, which was in White River Junction. And at this point in time, it's now 7 o'clock, 7:30. The sun is behind the mountains. It's fairly dark, hard to see, but thankfully there were enough street lights to see where we were going, but unfortunately cars couldn't really see us. So we get to our hotel, and I don't remember much. I was dead exhausted. I was talking to my friend John, and I was like, I don't think I can make it back home. At that point, I was ready to quit. You know, we were talking about me taking a bus home. I had talked about him giving him my car keys, so when he got back to the car, he could at least get home himself. You know, we had pizza, cleaned up, and that's the last thing I remember until the morning. And thankfully in the morning, I felt much better after that rest. And John, you know, he was nice enough. We rode to the bus station, talked about it some more, but I was feeling much better. He was very convincing, and he ended up talking me into finishing the rest of the trail. Probably the best decision I ever made, you know, sticking with it, getting to it. You know, and that's, you don't really realize how much harder certain trails are. But yeah, so my friend John talked me into at least attempting the ride back, and that was by far the best decision I ever made. The sights were amazing. You know, came across a family of deer, came across some turkeys, which was real nice to see. You know, all the wildlife you see when you're out on a woods trail is pretty sweet. And one of the other things that we found out on the way back was that the whole way from Boscawen to Lebanon was actually uphill. A very slight uphill, but, you know, it tacked on and made things worse. So the ride home was a cakewalk compared. Blah. The ride home was definitely much easier, as we were just sailing home, you know, just pedaling as hard as we can. The surface was a little bit harder because the trail had dried out more, and with the slight decline all the way back to Boscawen, it was just so much easier. So that's the story of me riding on the Northern Rail Trail. I'd like to thank you for joining in and listening to my story. It was fun to share some of the insights behind it, some of the difficulties I had, and how I thought I was ready for something, but turned out I wasn't. But sticking with it definitely is the best course of action. You got to just push through with the hardships. So I look forward to sharing more of my trail stories as time goes on, and I hope you come back and listen to another one, and I'll see you then.